Alright, so I'm just gonna really quick show you guys a 3-point light setup. Basically just like a good, easy light setup to use if you ever don't want to use or don't have access to HDRIs for some reason. So I'm just gonna do Arnold again because I exist in Arnold already. So I'm gonna throw in a light. I'll just move. Ooh, hello. I'm gonna put that out here and just see what that gets me in terms of a render. I don't expect this to be anything nice looking, but we can try. Oh no, my render is enormous. Wait for it. When I'm doing test renders on my laptop, I have a tendency to make my renders super tiny. Alright, and I'm just going to go ahead and take this light intensity and bump it up to 100. And now I actually have light on this character. Oh, huzzah. I might actually take this up to 1000. Cool. And I'll move that into position. Alright, so I'm just going to work in my perspective cam and fiddle with settings in my render cam. So I'm going to stop this maybe. And pull that back a bit, maybe up. I have like a weird, I kind of like moody lighting in my stuff. But that seems like a reasonable angle. So now I'm just going to fiddle with the intensity and say, okay, maybe that's perhaps as intense as I want this. And then one thing I'm going to do is just duplicate that light. So the idea is to basically have one light in front of your object, or sort of like lighting it from the side, one light that sort of fill in the dark shadows, and one light that comes from behind to sort of create like a cool little rim on the background. So the main light that's lighting your object is going to be your key light. So that's the one that I just put in here. Please stop. Alright, so I might actually shift that over. I'm going to try to make a little bit more aggressive shadows on this for the sake of the demo. My computer lags really hard when I do this kind of thing. Alright, I'm going to call that halfway decent. And I'm going to temporarily stop this render. And I'm going to turn my fill light back on, and it's pretty much just where I left the original light. So I'm just going to spin this thing around, and then maybe pull it back over here a tiny bit, and see what happens when I render this. It's probably going to, yeah, it's blowing out the side of my object a little bit, so usually the key light is going to be the brightest light that you have in the scene. So I'm going to see what happens by maybe take that down somewhere around 2,000? 3,000? Kind of don't hate 2,000 actually. Maybe like 2,500. I'm gonna call that halfway decent. So I'm going to stop this once again, and I'm gonna duplicate my fill light, and this is gonna be my rim light. The rim lights are like, in my experience, the hardest to like they're the hardest to set up, but they look really, really cool. So I'm gonna set this up to some unholy number, like 1,000, 10,000, whatever. Gonna give that a render, see what happens. So you can see there's like a giant bright light of terror behind my object. The goal, or like what I'm shooting for here, is going to be just like a little rim along the edge of the character. I usually like leaving it sort of along the edge of the hair. What if I... I do for some reason find it easier to set these guys up if I'm in looking through the light itself. So I might actually just click on my figure. Ooh, you can see there's like a little bit of that sort of shiny effect showing up. I've gone way too far over the side. It's now just lighting up my entire face. Alright, I'm going to call that halfway decent. Usually you'd shoot for something that would go like along the edge of your model, but sometimes depending on your material attributes and such, that's not actually entirely possible. Although also sometimes for the rim light, I will just set this intensity up like super crazy. Oh, whoops, that was my key light. I will just set this intensity up like insanely high. And that a lot of times will help to sort of get that harder light, but in this case it's like hitting the shirt and stuff too much, so I'm just gonna undo that and so you can see the difference with and without the key light, or the rim light, sorry. But yeah, so I think I'm just gonna call that like halfway decent. So if I'll go ahead and render this whole image. So you can see the other thing you'll notice definitely is that I have like 8 different versions of shadows on this thing, which isn't something I'm personally a fan of. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go through and I will do a little bit of light linking to fix that. And in this case, I'm going to go back to my perspective mode because I want these camera results to stay where they are. So I might actually, like, I'm also getting a really hard line where you can see where the fill light is, so I might just, like, pull the fill light back a little bit. And then increase the intensity ever so slightly, maybe 3,500. And you can still kind of see in the background, but whatever. Alright, so to get rid of the shadows, what I'm going to do is go into my light linking editor doodad. So I'm going to go to Windows Relationship Editors, light linking, and I'll go light centric. I don't know, I just like light centric for some reason. So I'm going to see what happens if I turn off light linking on the floor for the rim light. And you can see it gives me a much more even light there. And what happens if I also turn that off on the key light? Yeah, so I mean now you can see that it's pretty much no longer being affected, like the floor is no longer being affected by that light, which isn't necessarily the most realistic thing ever, but in this case it serves my purpose, I think. Yeah, I don't know, I just think that's kind of awkward there. So this is like pretty much the most basic light setup that you can do. The other thing that I might do, I'm just going to duplicate this key light again. And like every once in a while I'll go in and I'll be like, what if I just throw a light in on like just top down light, because I think it just helps illuminate things a little bit. Oh, I said stop rendering. So to go. And I'm just gonna throw this directly over 0, 0. Why not? And I'll give that a render, and you can see it adds just a little bit of brightness to the top of this, helps light up the floor a little bit, takes the shadow down again. Because before it was like super crazy black, and I'm not like a huge fan of aesthetic-wise. So probably leave that the way it is. Maybe take the brightness down a little bit because it feels a little much. And the other thing I might do just for grins is perhaps shift the walls in, because they're falling off into darkness a little bit, which isn't a bad thing. It's just not, I'm not crazy about that like really hard line that it makes, so I'm gonna see what happens if I do this. And you can see that kind of helps brighten the whole thing, like, a tiny bit. In this case, I think that was, like, very... Stop rendering. Ah! It's my floor. Push this over, and maybe like this, and... See, oh, there's a light in the middle of my wall. That's attractive. Kind of cool. Kind of also not what I'm going for. But I could also fix that by just grabbing, if I like the position of the wall. In this case, I kind of like the depth. I'm thinking maybe like push this over a bit. So I don't really want this shining right in my wall. So again, I'm just going to go to my light linking and cheat it really hard. And I think that's my fill light, so I'm going to turn it off for the walls. Okay, that was... Okay, definitely then my rim light? Yeah, okay. So cool. So now I have something maybe a little bit more, I guess, concentrated. The other thing I have a personal preference for doing is just changing the color of my lights ever so slightly. And mostly just because I really do like, you know, weird, trippy color lights. A lot of times I'll at least make them, if I'm not making them, you know, bright blue or something stupid, I'll make them something like ever so slightly like a light blue or a sort of orangish color. Because I find that that sort of helps to, I mean, this is like obviously very aggressive, but it sort of helps to give the idea that it's like a real light, maybe something coming from like a fluorescent bulb or a window. You can see that that's already a bit more yellow. And then I might, wait, that's my rim light. For my fill light, I might make that like a bluer color. Do the whole kind of played out blue and orange effect. Haha. I feel like that should be changing color. It's actually really weird that it's not changing color. Ah, because it's behind my wall. Turn my wall back on, and I will grab my stupid fill light and move it so it's not clipping through my wall. Do. There we go. Isn't that nice? Alright. Alright, so I think I kind of like that, and I made this really blue in the hopes that I'd be able to see it, and I'm thinking now that it is perhaps aggressive. And for some reason I really like making my rim lights like insane colors. Like, what if I made this like bright, like fuchsia? It just adds an ugly speck on my model. That's appealing. But I might make it like a little bluer and slightly less saturated. Bluer. Alright. So I'm gonna stop this really quick. And then I was fiddling around in Substance Painter and I made some textures for my person. And by textures, I mostly just mean I made a roughness mat. Like a real person roughness mat. So I'm gonna go through and I'm going to apply my roughness file, which is normal roughness. Cool. So that should make it a little bit rougher. So if I play this, hopefully it'll be... I forgot to check alpha's luminance. And you can see that the colors are maybe broken up a little bit more now. How about I look at that file, because this is the file I mapped in. I question why it actually doesn't super seem to be rendering there. Alright, so it is. It's just not as aggressive as I expected it to be. Still, why is it so shiny? Holy crap, what did I map that into? No, I definitely mapped into roughness. So I think I might actually just twiddle around in my file. And just pull the exposure up a little bit, see if that does anything close to what I want. It is entirely possible it's literally just because my light is so freakishly bright. But that absolutely doesn't feel... I mean, this is it in Substance Painter. And that's... I mean, that's significantly rougher, so I'm curious why it is not showing up here.